You're welcome to the Gavel. I'm Linda Kibi. Now, during the week, the Senate and House of Representatives passed a 607.9 billion naira 2022 budget for the Federal Capital Territory. Now, passing a 2022 budget for the FCT in November is incredibly late, and we learned that this was because the FCT administration presented the budget to the National Assembly in October. That's 3 months at the end of the year. Now, some federal lawmakers in both houses are displeased at how late the FCT minister submitted the city's 2022 budget to the National Assembly, and they want the standing committees on the FCT to provide efficient oversight of the administration. In what can be termed an abnormality, the 2022 budget of the Federal Capital Territory is before the Senate for passage in the 11th month of 2022. The FCT administration submitted the 2022 budget to the National Assembly in October, 3 months to the end of the year. The new chairman of the FCT committee presents a report of the 2022 FCT budget before the Senate on Wednesday. The total proposal for the appropriation bill is 607.9 billion naira.
76,569,904,857 naira only, representing 12.59%, is proposed for personal costs for the year 2022. Overhead costs, 138 billion 199,851,110 naira only, representing 22.73%, is proposed as overhead costs for the year 2022.
Some federal lawmakers note several problems with the budget, notably the timing for the presentation of the budget, as well as the revenue performance of the FCT in the 2022 budget.
What has the FCT been doing? Now, how is it run? Because it means either it has not been doing anything, or maybe they have been implementing half budget. I think there is need for stepping up on how the FCT deals with its budget.
There are too many projects in FCT that have become almost moribund. The Apple Road to Asokoro that has been under construction for over 3 years, and I can imagine that such projects should be given priority. So, Mr. President, as a Senate, we too must give direction. It's not just to present this budget. We must give direction to areas that must be prioritized.
The Senate passes the 607.9 billion naira 2022 budget of the FCT. Because of the very late submission of the budget, it will most likely be extended to the following year and will run concurrently with the 2023 budget. The House of Representatives also passed the 2022 budget of the Federal Capital Territory. During the session, the Speaker of the House of Representatives decries the late passage of the bill and urged the chairman of the various committees to ensure that the various ministries, departments and agencies bring their budgets for scrutiny on time to avoid a repeat of such occurrence.
To authorize the issue from the Federal Capital Territory Administration Statutory Revenue Fund of the Federal Capital Territory Administration account the total sum of 607,952,023,580 naira only, of which the sum of 76,569,940,857 naira only is for personnel costs, and the sum of 127,603,382,310 naira only is for overhead costs for the service of the Federal Capital Territory Abuja for the financial year commencing from January 1, 2022 and ending on 31st December 2022, standing in the name of Abdullah Idris Garba. All members will recall that the bill was referred to the committee on Wednesday, 23rd November 2022. Report is ready for presentation. Honorable Gavel is invited to present the report.
Now, staying with the administration of the Federal Capital Territory, we interviewed the Chairman, Senate Committee on FCT, Senator Smart Adeyemi, to discuss the infrastructure and security challenges experienced in the capital city.
If you look at the districts within the city, within the capital city of Abuja, you discover that there was no provision made for low-income earners to reside within the federal capital, within the central city of Abuja. Most of the infrastructures that are provided in Abuja, they are limited infrastructure within the city, except when you go to the area council. And the problem we have today, which we want to address next week, is that the area councils have been disallowed from allocating land to investors and individuals, which to me negate the spirit and content of the Constitution of Nigeria of separation of powers. Now, the implication of that is that government can no longer meet the ever-increasing population of the city itself and the suburb, the area councils. And the area councils are handicapped by a decision made before now that they cannot allocate land for people, nor can they allocate land for investors. Now, there's a limit to which government can invest in the infrastructures without looking at the possibility of partnering with investors, those who will believe in investing and providing infrastructures and making their money. There's no city in the modern city, like you have said, in the world, where government alone develop the city. You have to create the platform for investors to come in. Now, in Abuja, the problem we have today is that you have people with money in their hands and they want to go into housing, for instance, but the land are not just available because the Abuja city itself seems that it has expanded and it has covered some areas that today they are part of the city, but they actually belong in Detroit. They in the demarcation, in the constitution, they belong to the area council, which you can call the local government of Abuja. Now they have issued an order years before now, restraining the area councils from allocating land, and the implication is that government will now carry the burden of investing in infrastructure, which you and I know that there's a limit to which government can do that. So that accounts for the problem we are facing now. I'm just about to do that by next week. Next week, I want to call the authorities to the fact that those who have been allocated land by way of approval given by area councils, which those area councils can confirm, should be allowed to invest in building housing estate, which will reduce the cost of housing, which will make housing available, and by extension, those who want to build schools can equally go ahead to build schools and help us to provide affordable schools for even children of the downtrodden people. The fact is that Abuja, to me, those who consider Abuja, perhaps they had in mind Abuja that would be solely for the high-income earners, those who have the means, and I doubt if there's any city that can survive without the poor. But if you look at Abuja's main city, Abuja is not built for the poor. Abuja is too expensive for any income earners. That explains why you see civil servants, they find it difficult to resume at 8 o'clock because many of them live about 2-3 hours out of town. Okay, something must be done to appreciate that a city cannot survive without the less privileged people. So for me, we must open up the city by allowing the area councils to provide land for people to build, who are especially those area councils that are very close to the city. Today, the city is so narrow in the sense that if you look at it from the southern belt to the northern belt of this city, you have area councils already being part of the center city of Abuja because the city developed so rapidly that they had to expand to those areas. Now, these are some of the challenges confronting Federal Capital Territory. We must appreciate that. We must allow the area council to function. We must equally give them the standard that is required. But more importantly is that we must take into consideration that government alone cannot, and there's nowhere in the world where government provide all the infrastructures. Infrastructural facilities in modern cities are a combination of partnership with investors. Government cannot provide everything that is required. It's not just possible. Not even in New York City. You have companies, housing companies that develop districts and make them available. Well, what government would need to do is to regulate, to make sure that it is available at affordable cost, but not to now make it impossible for people to invest in infrastructures. Government cannot alone provide infrastructures. So for me, I think what is needed is a partnership between the government and those who want to invest. I can tell you, Abuja is a good place to invest because the market is probably next to Lagos. You will recall that when I was in the 7th Senate, I came out with a bill which eventually passed into an act which culminated to the establishment of the FCT FIRS. Now I've told them as from January, we must put the mechanism in place for property tax. Again, as I will talk about shortage of accommodation in Abuja, in the midst of uncountable number of properties, houses completed, nobody lives there. Okay? Abuja again is a safe haven for corruption, where people amass so much wealth. What they do is to build houses. And these houses, they lock them up because they want somebody to pay 2 million naira per month. Now, if we impose the property tax in place, people who are built will be forced to lease out their properties or they continue to pay the tax.
So you are calling for a greater partnership between the FCT administration and the private sector. So what legislative support is the FCT committee giving to the FCT, which you oversight and make laws for, to provide robust partnership, to provide a situation where there's robust partnership between the FCT administration and the private sector?
Just last week, we stopped the FCT administration, specifically the development control, from pulling down about 50 housing units, which were already almost 95% completed in a place they call Kantampe. What happened was, this area is already in part of the main city, but by demarcation of the city, it falls within the area council. Now, the FCT administration in Abuja felt those who have gone there didn't get the approval. What the approval they had was that of the area council. So these are some of the things we want to do. We want to call there are quite a number of cases like that. We want to hold a meeting next week with the FCT minister and his subordinate, his directors, and some of the investors who are ready to invest or who have already commenced investing based on the paper they have emanating from the local authorities, so that they can allow them to be, and that will improve, probably reduce the cost of housing, because the more you have housing units, mass housing units completed, estate completed, then the more you can go ahead to remove the shanties. When you remove the shanty buildings, those of them that have been harbored by criminals, then those who are not criminals will be able to afford affordable housing scheme, which I can see springing up now, because there are quite a number of Nigerians who are ready to invest in Abuja, but they are constrained because of some of the bottlenecks, which by next week we want to commence getting them off the net, so that Nigerians who have the means can come and invest in Abuja, and thereby helping the development of the city, reducing criminality in the city, and making sure that equally a good percentage of Nigerians who are gainfully employed can have a roof over their head and live comfortably with their families.
You're welcome back to the Gavel. We continue with the interview with the Chairman, Senate Committee on FCT, Senator Smart Adeyemi, on developments in the capital city. Revenue is at the heart of the problem with infrastructure, not only in the FCT, in the country at large. And so what creative ways, is your committee thinking about in trying to increase, it's suggesting to the FCT administration, whether by way of legislation, to increase revenue in the FCT?
There are quite a number of ways the FCT can generate revenue. It has to do with putting the mechanism in place, the structures that are required, the legal structures and framework. Now that the revenue board is gradually taking shape, and they are already expanding their scope of operations. And I'm not in doubt that by next year, they should have been able to record more revenue than they did this year. Don't forget too that the COVID-19 for 2 years, actually affected the flow of economic activities in FCT, and it made it impossible for revenue to be generated significantly that it ought to have been over the years, because the revenue board itself came into being not quite long, maybe about 3 years now, the implementation started.
Now, you were the chairman of the FCT committee in the 7th Assembly. And now you are the new chairman of the FCT committee in the 9th Assembly. Time has gone by between both positions, and it's been observed that the FCT now is not the FCT of when you were the chairman. The FCT now has serious issues of infrastructure, street lights are not working, and serious security challenges. We know, yes, security challenges have been an issue across the country, but the FCT has been worsening in the FCT. What is your committee doing about this?
One of the reasons why we embarked on this oversight function was for us to take on the spot assessment of all the areas of, all the problematic areas of the city, where there are some areas that are prone to criminal activities. There are some areas that we know they are unsafe. There are areas that we knew before now that needs to take more extra vigilance on the activities of people we see around these places. And we discovered one of the problems that needed to be addressed was the fact that in some of these areas, there are no street lights. Some of them, the street lights, they are not working. So in the budget, we are compelling, so to speak, by way of adjusting the request of the authorities of the FCT by removing a good percentage of money allocated to areas that we felt will not be needed, by way of the fact that they have things that can substitute those requests they are asking for. For instance, if they are asking for utility vehicles, they are asking for buying of more computers, the question we ask is that, what happened to the one you have been using? So in that case, we made effort to increase the possibility of having more solar lighting of the city. So in this year's budget, 2022, despite the fact it's going to wind up by December, we are proposing that both the 2022 and 2023 budget will run concurrently, because the budget came late, which was not the fault of the National Assembly. So we are compelling them that the budget must run concurrently, so that money is not returned to the Treasury at the expense of workers, at the expense of security of life and properties. Now that we cannot have power supply, so to speak, for 15 hours even in the FCT, we must augment it by installing solar poles in strategic areas. Quite a number of streets, you'll be seeing solar light now. At times, people do not know that they are powered by solar. They are not actually from the public power supply. So these are some of the amendments we are making in the budget, based on the fact that the oversight function we did was not just in the day. We went out at night to look at the city. We went around to look at areas that crime can easily be perpetrated without being arrested. All these areas we move around. It might interest you to know that even up to 9, 10 p.m., we were on oversight. On Sunday, we went on oversight. We wanted the budget that will address the areas of need and challenges.
Finally, sir, your bill on your rent bill, what stage is it now?
The bill has gone through all the hurdles. We have done the public hearing. What's required of us is to do a clean copy and present on the floor of the Senate. Well, the bill is equally facing the obstacles of those who have interest in properties and who are in high places, who do not want the bill to be passed. But for me, I hold the view that it pays the rich if the poor is allowed to live comfortably. In the bill, we are asking that if you are a new tenant, a first tenant, your maximum deposit will be 3 months advance payment. And after that, you do monthly payment in first instance. You cannot ask people to pay beyond what they can afford. If you have a block of flats in Abuja and you're asking a civil servant to pay annually 7 million, 10 million, and his salary is less than 10 million per annum. So how is he going to survive? These are the issues, and these issues must be addressed. It's only in this country that when people embark on back in a housing project and they put up an estate, they want to recoup the money in 3 years. In the developed nations, when people invest in property, in assets, they do not look at the possibility of getting what they're investing in 5 years. They look at 10, 15, long period. But in our nation, when people invest in property, they want to build another property emanating from the rent of the first one. It doesn't work that way.
Let's take a look at some of the major happenings in the House of Representatives during the week. The chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on Tertiary Education says there may be no end to the current protracted crisis between the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, and the federal government until the federal government goes back to the agreement reached with the union in 2009 and implements it. The committee chairman says both parties in the impasse have to come together in the interest of Nigerian students who have been the most affected by the crisis. ASU was on strike for 8 months in 2022 and is currently at loggerheads with the federal government over the half salary it was paid for in October because of the federal government's no work, no pay policy.
If you listen to everybody's argument, you will be in a dilemma as to where you will queue. And therefore we have maintained middle of the course position, trying to remind our respected, highly respected members of the academia to the fact that the fight is not only between them and government. At the end of the day, the consequences and implications snowball down to Nigerians and our children. However, we have also reminded government that the government itself usually is the architect of this problem. The whole crisis boiled down to the agreement of 2009. That is the bone of contention.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives Ad Hoc Committee on Abandoned Federal Government Properties in the FCT has promised occupants of Shagari low-cost housing estates of special consideration in the sale of the properties. The chairman of the committee made the promise when he paid a visit to the residents of Shagari housing estates in Kwali, Abaji, and Sheda for an on-the-spot assessment. The visit is part of the ongoing investigation by the committee on the circumstances surrounding the status of the estates over the years.
Your pain is our pain, and your joy is our joy. I want to assure you, as the House of Representatives, that we get an early solution to this issue. On this note, we're not only stopping with the houses that have been occupied, but as is the spirit right now of the federal government, to equally see how we can dispose of moribund infrastructure and assets that is lying down. We'll see how the places that have not been occupied can equally be sold and the finance to good use.
This is where we call it a day on this week's edition of The Gavel. If you have any views on any of the issues discussed, please email us on thegavel@channelstv.com. Thank you for staying with us and see you again next week.